Welcome to episode 12 of the Sustainable Tech Partner Podcast, hosted by Joe Panettiere. Today's guest is Mark Kidd, Executive Vice President and General Manager of Iron Mountain Data Centers and Asset Lifecycle Management. We discuss overall sustainability trends and ALM trends, and we touch on the Regency Technologies acquisition, which involves IT asset disposition.
Great to be here today. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you carving out some time. Now, I want to learn a little bit about yourself, but before we even, actually tell me a little bit about yourself and where you're physically located today.
Yeah, so great question. Today, I'm sitting in Iron Mountain's global headquarters here in Boston, Mass. But I normally am residing in Zurich, Switzerland.
Okay. Now, what's the background there? Of course, you're from the U.S., are you not?
Yeah. You can probably tell by the accent. I'm from the northeast part of the U.S., originally from Maine, and probably some of what you'll ask me about today is I run two global businesses for Iron Mountain, and so when you have people in all the time zones in all the parts of the world, Europe's a good place to be, and Switzerland's a nice place within Europe. So that's how I end up splitting my time between the two.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I tell you what, I'm based in New York. I'm happy to meet you anytime in the U.S., but if you ever need me to come across the pond, as they say, I'm happy to meet you on your ground as well.
We welcome everybody.
That sounds great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. Now that we all know where you're located, tell us a little bit about your role at the company. What's your focus at Iron Mountain?
Sure. So two primary responsibilities here at Iron Mountain. Been with the company a little over 20 years, and the one business that I've been running for the last decade, built it from near scratch, was our global co-location business, which is power, space, cooling, network connectivity for hyperscalers and our data center customers. The other business that I'm responsible for running here at Iron Mountain is what we call our Asset Lifecycle Management business, which is IT assets, particularly through midlife management through their final disposition, circularity or disposition, depending on what's happening at the end of the life.
Yeah. Two key areas I'm certainly interested in both, because my previous media life, I should say, I focused on managed IT service providers and certainly co-location centers, et cetera. And then more recently with Sustainable Tech Partner, we're certainly focused on asset lifecycle management. So that journey, tell me first a little bit about that data center journey for you and that organization. Now, I think you managed that since its inception, since of 2013-ish?
2013, yeah, since we launched it in 2013. So a little over, I guess, going on 11 years now almost, in a few months. But yeah, so the data center business here at Iron Mountain, for those that, many people do know us, but for those that don't, Iron Mountain, we operate in 60 plus countries. Our original business that we historically are most well known for is business paper record storage. That was the business that we've been in. But really over the last decade, the company's transformed in a huge way, where we have a significant portfolio of digital solutions in terms of what we can do with AI, ML, business process improvements. And then as we were growing and looking at what else we could do for customers, one of the areas that we really were interested in was the co-location services. And I know it's hard to imagine today what the world was like 10 years ago, but back then the cloud service providers were really nascent. They hadn't really gotten started yet. And so our thought process at the time as Iron Mountain was, we service a huge percentage, over 95% of the Fortune 2000. We're already in many cases with IT services. We had and still to some degree have the tape management business. It's just less active. It's become more archival over time. And so for us, we looked at that and said, hey, this is a really interesting opportunity with the buyer set we have. Co-location at that point was still 70% insourced. And we said, hey, we have trust, we have credibility, and we think we can really help companies make a better, more efficient, trusted decision to outsource it. So that was the genesis of our story, was actually starting with our, the same customers that we've always had as Iron Mountain and building on that value prop that we've had all along. I will say kind of two interesting things on the journey. One, very relevant to kind of our conversation here, and I guess maybe both points. Probably about 5 to 6 years in, we woke up and said, you know what, this is clearly a market where the hyperscale customers are going to be consuming the preponderance of demand in the market. And so we opened up that aperture and started to work with those customers as well, which has been a big part of the business growing over the last several years. The other thing that happened around the same time is we were thinking about, what is the environmental strategy for the data center business? And so it was 2017. We were actually the first co-location company to go to 100% green source power
Wow.
using P&As. And it came out of a conversation, believe it or not, that I had at the time with Greenpeace when they'd been writing about the industry. And I chatted with them, and you can have many kind of views on what you think about that. But what was super interesting is the one comment that stuck with me at that point in time is there's not a place in the world that Greenpeace could put their data center that was 100% green powered.
Right.
And I was like, wow, this is a really interesting phenomenon. So that became part of kind of that data center journey as well. And we went there, and we've been very environmentally focused from very early on.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think that's it's similar to one of the reasons we launched Sustainable Tech Partner. There's views all over the place in terms of green and renewable energy, and there's healthy debate about various sources of energy. But what I love about your story is you said, hey, I had this conversation and I acted on it. I think if more of us just sat down and had conversations with people from various viewpoints and then act on it, we'd be making progress. So when you say you went to renewable energy, is that across all your data centers or a certain data center? What does that mean?
Yeah, it is. So the way that we've approached it is, and I think how we define renewable and 100% has evolved over time. Back then, if we could source an equal number of hours from a new generation source, so not just buying RECs in the open market, that was never our strategy, but rather bring on new generation through virtual power purchase agreements. So we actually were the off taker on those, bring them onto the market. Now, our view at that point was effectively anywhere we brought them on in the world, and sort of the total number of hours started as kind of green. Over time, what's happened is we've evolved that view to, hey, we want the power sourced locally, and we can get into a discussion of how local is local, but let's just say locally. And we've really started to push the 24/7 approach to it, insofar as Google took a step forward I think it's a couple of years ago now, and said, look, we want to go to 24/7 green power source, which means not just local, not just new, but actually sourcing it for all hours of the day in different directions. So, forcing us to think differently. We signed up and said, hey, that's our aspiration as well. Again, kind of a first mover on that. And it's not easy. And in fact, we know economically that the last several percent don't make sense today. Like, we get that. But
Mhm.
our view, kind of back to what you said a minute ago, is if you don't take action and start on the journey, you're not moving, and you're not kind of thinking about the creative solution. And so for us, that's really been the thought process, is we'd rather put something out to challenge ourselves, get moving, and then we can work on the solution as it evolves.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of that get moving strategy, was it easier to get moving in Europe and in other regions, and then maybe catch up in the US just based on the renewable energy deployments that were available to you?
It's a really interesting question. So as we were doing it, this is look, it's changed a lot in the last couple of years. But if you go back 5 years, the VPPA market didn't really exist in Europe. So it was actually much easier to get started, only because the financial structuring and mechanisms and offtake agreements were ahead. So you had government support and governments driving the policy, but in terms of actually being able to match it up to demand, that took more effort. And certainly, when we think about the large hyperscalers who have now, over the last 5 years, really driven this market on a global basis, they've really opened up new parts of the world in terms of what's possible. Some of the agreements they've struck, which makes it a little bit easier for us to actually make progress and really match our power in some parts of the world. But to me, it's not a competition. It's actually, to me, this is a collaboration, because
Mhm.
these aren't places to compete. It's actually, it's often more cost effective, if not the same. And we're trying to do the right thing, as well as, what our clients want.
Yep. Yep. No, I hear you. So, tell me a little bit about a journey. You spoke about data center and co-location. where does asset lifecycle management come in first for you? Like, how did you get involved in it? And also for Iron Mountain, or vice versa. Maybe you want to start with Iron Mountain and then talk about you. You tell me.
Yeah, so probably start with Iron Mountain, then I can kind of weave myself in because the rest of we, if you will, started before I got involved. So Iron Mountain, when we think about the IT asset lifecycle management business, um, if you go back and think about what I said about the co-location business at the beginning, one of the reasons we went in is we said, hey, we have a brand of trust, protection, security, and this is a major decision in the co-location process. When we think about the IT end of life process, an enormous consideration is what's happening to the data on the IT asset and who do we trust to get rid of that. And so
Right.
Mountain went into this, it's probably 5-ish years ago now. We started, and what we did is we sold it and we serviced the transportation and then brought it to a partner network. And this was very much on the enterprise side of the business. So again, if you think about where we started the co-location business with the direct enterprise, same thing here. And the initial starting point was, again, just around that trust security. The next move Iron Mountain made in the space was about 2 years ago. And what we did then is we purchased a company called ITRenew, and they were particularly focused on the hyperscale segment of the business. So again, if you follow that same kind of evolution, start with enterprise, then you see what's happening in the market, move to hyperscale, which starts to move you into a very large homogeneous supply of IT assets, which pushes you into, okay, now I have millions of pounds of end of life IT stuff coming through my facility, or you have to get really good quickly at thinking about how do we reuse this? How does e-waste work, scrap, where are these things flowing downstream? So that was kind of the next part of the evolution. I came in about a little less than a year ago now. We were thinking about how we evolved the business. And what we were doing and what we were seeing was we saw an opportunity to take it even a step further, which is we were making progress on that hyperscale side, but we weren't doing the full service delivery on the enterprise side of the business or the end user device side of the business. And so when we start thinking about what's the right thing to do, for the client environmentally, it's once you have that data destroyed, it's, hey, can we actually reuse this device? Can we put it back into circulation immediately? Highest and best use, right? Lowest carbon impact. Alternatively, can we harvest components from it? And if not, how do we do that refurbishment? How do we create new retail channels to get it back out to people? Again, good carbon story, good, financial story in terms of what happens next. And then, we actually been working on even further increasing kind of our e-waste capabilities, thinking about sorting, best value, where things are ending up in the world.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. But you've been super busy on this business, man. It's been about a year since you've gotten involved in it.
Yeah, that's right. A little less than a year. I think it was February this past year. So I guess maybe 10, 11 months now.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I was about to ask some questions, and you actually stole the answers before I even delivered the question, at least partially. But I'll ask the question anyway, just to help continue framing the conversation. So, if I'm a small business owner or MSP in the small business market or reseller, when I hear of asset life cycle management, I'm probably thinking PCs, maybe some local printers, maybe a local router, et cetera. But then hyperscaler, like now you're talking about data centers that just go on forever, so to speak, in terms of how much equipment is in there. Are you doing the end to end at this point in terms of every type of device? Where are you playing and where are you not playing?
Yeah, so basically the way to think about it is we're doing most of the end to end. So there are some areas that we don't do quite as deeply as others, but they come in. So certainly everything coming out of the data center, whether that be a hyperscale data center or a corporate data center or a public sector government data center, all that, racks, servers, gears, network, switches, cabling, everything that, you'd see coming out of that environment. Yes, definitely, and creating end markets around it. End user device, you might imagine there's actually more specialization. And so we're very big laptops, believe it or not, desktops are still very big when we look around the world, peripherals, monitors, big. You see more specialization in things like mobile devices, actually. So we do a bunch of that, but there are other people in the ecosystem that actually just do mobile devices in huge volume. And so those are that's to
Mhm.
give you a sense, very broad, but it's a very big, very fragmented ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah. As you look back on what's roughly been a year of being involved in this particular business unit or business focus area, were there key trends that come to mind for 2023 in terms of what you saw on asset lifecycle management?
Yeah, so I think this is a when I think about the asset lifecycle management business, and to your point, kind of 11 months in and trends, I think there are a couple big ones that were coming up. One is when we think about how we capture value, especially out of the data center assets, a lot of that is actually breaking down to the component level. And so you're talking about selling, hard drives, memory, CPU, and thinking about those secondary markets around the world. The big item that happened sort of throughout the year, a little bit at the very end of 2022, is that the global price point, specifically around the memory market, took a pretty meaningful step backwards. And what's interesting is in the reuse market, it actually relatively closely follows the primary market, and that's the primary market. The Samsungs of the world have started to recover and are expected to kind of going into 2024. And I think the reason I highlight that as a trend, just kind of at the industry level, is it really kind of causes you to rethink kind of the economic model of the business, which is when prices have been at all-time high, people kind of build businesses around the all-time high instead of saying, okay, this is really a business that's about, the way I think about it, fundamentally for many customers, it's about data security, the service associated with that, and then giving the customer the peace of mind that we're going to make the best decision from a data security perspective to then be able to reuse that asset in the most thoughtful way. And you really shift the value to that. And by thoughtful, I mean, like, if we can reuse it, no more carbon footprint, pretty much as is with no risk. Great. If it means that it has to go and be scrapped and we need to make sure, the ferrous metals are going to one place in the world, the non-ferrous is going somewhere else, plastics, that we're doing that all in a very responsible way.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing stuff. So are you seeing what are you seeing in terms of the demand for reuse or redeployment, both in terms of maybe it's a company that wants to reuse it internally, it's already their equipment and they want to reuse it internally, or perhaps you're moving it on to a new customer. What type of activity you're seeing or demand?
Yeah, so it's been increasing the last couple of years. We've certainly seen it this year, and it comes sort of in twofold. One is helping companies actually, many of us that have worked at big companies know that we often have a lot of old IT equipment kind of sitting around that we're supposed to send back, maybe we don't. And one of the things we're doing is we've been helping companies actually accelerate the return depot and redeployment of that equipment so they get more use and more life out of it, potentially even extend the life with some repair type work. And
Yeah.
so we post COVID, where we have workforces that are more distributed, we actually see a lot more demand around that type of service. Where in the old days, everyone would go to an office, it would all kind of get sorted out by someone there. It was very easy to do. That still happens in many customers, but there's all another customer segment that actually is looking for kind of a broader solution, which is really driving the what I'll call in life, early life usage up higher. There are a growing number of customers, albeit quite small, that are actually buying um, previously used IT gear at the corporate setting. It's a little less, frequent there. But what I will say is when we kind of take a step back, the demand globally for refurbished, reused equipment continues to grow. And so if you think about where these things, when I end up, is you have things going into Southeast Asia, a little bit into India, Middle East, Africa. And so, these might be stores that are selling 10, 15, 20 units, but it's about how do we aggregate it? How do we build a supply chain? And you actually see, growing digital availability, through the reuse. It's not always here, but there's demand broadly around the world.
Got it. Excellent. So, the timing for this conversation, I'll admit this is pure luck on my part, but I think you guys just closed the Regency Technologies acquisition. I know you announced it in the last day or so, so I don't know when it quote unquote actually closed, but With that deal in mind, can you tell us a little bit about, the trends you expect to see this year when it comes to asset lifecycle management and where Regency Technologies fits into that strategy?
Absolutely. So, yeah, yes, we just announced it yesterday. That's right. We did just complete the Regency Technologies transaction, and what they historically, I think it's an interesting industry because we came kind of from the service, the data protection angle. I think those that know Regency have a presupposition they came more from the recycling or kind of the waste angle in terms of how they approach the business. What we found super compelling, what we talk about and what you can see in the press release, is they really they added to our capabilities some of what I already listed a few minutes ago, but they have a huge amount of inbound retail consumer electronics, so they have a very high degree of refurbishment capability. They have a very high degree of consumer retail capability in terms of actually being able to push that product back out to consumers that are looking for it and demand it, both domestically in the U.S., but also through channels out to other parts of the world. And then as we think about the e-waste scrap side of the business, when things are truly going end of life, there's a lot of value that they bring now to us in the operation in terms of how we think about separating, sorting, doing the initial processing before into different category streams before they go out, which is economically helpful, but also is very helpful because it's sending much denser loads of material when they get shipped out. So when we think about this business, yes, we talk about kind of IT assets and kind of the life cycle, and there's value in it being a full IT asset, and that's definitely the best value financially, carbon, all the above. But when it actually turns into scrap, e-waste, that's a point in life when it's really about weight. And when we think about shipping, at that point, there's a lot high cost, high carbon cost to shipping. And so being able to consolidate it as much as possible pre-shipment actually helps bring that whole chain together. So Regency helps us with all those things. My view is it plays into all the trends we're seeing, which is further digital enablement around the world, creating a broader market for these secondary products, which is both effectively creating more value, enabling more that we can resell, being able to refurbish more, and I think that as we get more and more scale there, the continuity of supply enables us to open up more markets over time
Got it. Okay.
for reused devices.
Got it. Got it. Now I get a naive, dumb question for you, and you can pass on it if you don't like it because I don't know if it's relevant or not, but I'll ask it. So in 2023, we saw interest rates consistently rise, and now they're leveling off. We're in January of 2024. If and when interest rates come down, are there any implications for the asset lifecycle management business, or is it completely unrelated in terms of what you're up to and the market trends you see?
Yeah, so generally speaking, when I think about interest rates, they're most impactful on high capital businesses
Mhm.
insofar as where you're going to put a lot of leverage against something. Iron Mountain, we operate these all as consolidated businesses, but broadly speaking, the asset lifecycle management business is a very low capital intensivity business. There is a little bit of it, marginally a tiny bit of investment when you think about some sorting capabilities, those types of things in machines. But really, you can start with quite a small footprint, and it's about how do you actually manage the kind of the reverse manufacturing, reverse logistics process. So not really a huge impact at all.
Got it. Got it. And tell me a little bit about your partner strategy here. Do partners get involved in the overall asset lifecycle management and circular economy strategy with you?
They do. So super important question. Partners exist in many places, many places in the business. So all the way up to we Iron Mountain operates in 60 countries, but we don't have a footprint that operates IT asset processing in 60 countries. So we use partners still in some places. When I went back and talked about our original strategy in the market, we have partners that support us there. We have specialist partners that support us in areas in terms of it could be repairing mobile devices, for instance, where they're actually helping, really bringing more value to that and creating the secondary market around it, where they're doing it just a much bigger scale. And then when you go all the way to the end of the supply chain, we have partners that are doing really unique processing of circuit boards, which is actually setting it up for the metal harvesting coming off of it. So when you think about kind of each component, we might get some sophistication and do a bit more over time, but really until things are all the way decomposed into the material source parts on the separation end, there's always someone that's helping out there. And we do a lot of work with many folks in the broader ecosystem around that. Super important.
Got it. Okay. Follow-up question about 2024. And
Yeah.
again, for viewers, we're talking, Mark and I are talking on January 11th, 2024. As you look ahead, and I throw out terms like e-waste reduction, asset lifecycle management, circularity strategies.
Yeah.
Are there particular trends or inflection points or pivots that you see coming? How do you expect, what do you expect to be sort of unfolding this year?
I think it's a great question. I think it's a really good question. There's a few big items that I think are coming into play as we look forward. In no particular order, rare earth metals being captured back. Historically, it has not been particularly cost effective to capture them back off the devices. I think, if we look at the geopolitical context we see ourselves in now, countries are interested in being able to have access to rare earth metals. And so the market around how do we capture these in a cost effective way? How do we create at the country level, how do countries create supply around this that they can have? I think these are topics that are definitely moving up to be top of mind. And we see more and more people spending time on that. So that's kind of on the proactive, supply chain. What are we doing? And yes, it's much more cost effective if you can do it as well, if you can figure out how to harvest it. So that's definitely top of mind. I think we're continuing to see a lot of conversation around effectively around plastics, and there are parts of the world that are still getting a lot of equipment sent, and where we have manual work being done to kind of decompose it. The intent of those countries is not to kind of receive it, but it's still getting in there, and there's still big economies where they're doing a lot of the sorting by hand, and then the disposal is sometimes impacting the water and the environment, perhaps the air quality with burning. I think we see some additional countries waking up and making sure that they aren't subject to those pressures in terms of kind of what's happened with the market. So we definitely see more conversation around that, potential rule changes that could evolve, something that we're continually watching. We try extraordinarily hard, and we work with all sorts of certified partners to make sure we're not part of that. But at the end of the day, we know the problem's still happening. So it means that out there, something is still going on. So, definitely rare earth metals, definitely plastics in terms of things that we see going on. That's more end of the value chain. I think in terms of reuse, there's been a big newspaper article, I think it was in the UK earlier this year, that was talking about hard drive reuse. There's a very robust market for secondary hard drives on a global basis. There are some very big customers that, for data privacy reasons, still opt to shred and destroy those. I think whether it be this year or the next 5 years, my sense is that that's a conversation that gets revisited, because ultimately, there has to be a way to kind of avoid that level of waste and still maintain the data concerns related to it. And so I think those are some of the bigger ones that we've seen. The market reopening in terms of just people using more secondary products, or governments like what we see happening in France requiring a higher percentage of reused content in primary production. I think those aren't step changes this year, but I think those are just continuous things that we see more what I would call positive movement on every year as we go forward.
Got it. Got it. Well, this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because obviously I can just feel that this is your DNA in terms of your day-to-day life right now. Are you enjoying the journey? You're 11 months into sort of this portion of it. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, so I mean, the thing that's amazing is, I've been here at Iron Mountain a very long time. The business has been really successful. If we look at what Iron Mountain's been doing more broadly over the last 5 years, it's great. What I love about this ALM market in particular, in addition to everything else, that I'm still responsible for, is that, this is an area that there's a huge opportunity to change what we're doing on a global basis. And you've heard me kind of say thematically a few times now, hey, the more that we can keep, using as is, it's better for everybody monetarily and carbon wise. And, you kind of look at that in each step of the chain, you say, wow, there's like no bad answer here as long as we can create secondary markets because it's better for people financially and it's better for the environment at the same time. And what I like, and what I think I get really excited about is there's just a huge opportunity to keep pushing on this on a global basis. And I think Iron Mountain we're well positioned. We, as I've said, operate in a large set of countries today. And can we build our voice? Can we get more involved in policy? Can we help people think about this in a different way? Can we build new secondary markets? I think the answer is yes to all of that. And so we're excited, and it's a cool journey so far.
Very good. Very good. For those who want to learn more about the journey, maybe it's partners who are not familiar with the company yet, or maybe it's customers who want to learn more. Is there a particular website or a place they should go?
Yeah, so the best place to go is to follow kind of get the detail is ironmountain.com. And there's a section on both ALM and a section on our co-location data center services. Also, if you're on LinkedIn, we have showcase pages which live underneath the parent LinkedIn page, where we have nice kind of content flow associated separately with both businesses as well. So there's an Iron Mountain Asset Lifecycle Management page that folks can go follow along with as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for the education. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that conversation today, Joe. Really appreciate it.
This podcast is copyright of Sustainable Tech Partner and Mentori Ventures. Music written, performed, and copyright of my son, also named Joe Panettiere.